Salam and welcome back to our channel, Somali Dispatch, SomaliDispatch.com. My name is Abdi Kadir Gulet. Much has been said and written about Somalia's current political and social unrest, but not in the origins and how we got to where we are today, and perhaps where we are headed as Somalis if we continue on this trajectory. The role of the war profiteers in Somalia's current political unrest is never really analyzed to the point where the masses could understand what's going on in the country. Luckily, academic Mohamoud Gaildon have extensively written about the subject. Gaildon is a physicist and an author of the novel, The Yibir of Las Burgabo. He resides in the United States and he joins us in discussing this point. Mohamoud Gaildon, welcome to Somali Dispatch, and thank you for your time today and coming on and explaining some of these pregnant relative, I should say, Somali issues pertaining to the conflict and how it arose and where we are today and perhaps where we could end up. If you could start us off by giving us an idea and an overview of what provoked the civil strife, what provokes civil strikes, I should say, strifes in general, and in Somalia's case, what were the root causes?
Well, a lot of literature is out there written about the civil wars that happened in probably the last half a century. And I think we as Somalis need to really read that, because that will lead to understanding a lot of things about ourselves, about our situation as Somalis. The consensus is that civil wars and associated with that is, of course, the collapse of the state is associated with or comes from grievances, and the grievances come from injustice. In general, what happens is that as a result of either dictatorship could be by a dictator of one person, or it could be by a group of people. It could be by what's called an oligarchy. And so what happens is that people feel that they are being marginalized, and that causes some resentment. So that's the basis usually of civil wars and the ultimate collapse of the state. Injustice, and the injustice is accompanied, of course, with grievances.
It's interesting how in the multiple articles you wrote about this extensively, how you dive into how as a society in general we're victimized by what you just described and how the state collapses begin. But even though the effects are general, the profiteers and those that propagate and are part of the governments that are behind these things, we're aligned with them. Even though most Somalis are victims of this condition that you just described, there seems to be some mentality in the victims that those that are perpetrating these outrageous and atrocious acts, we're aligned with them. How do you explain that?
When you look at it, it's really very strange. It's something that happens, and before even the profiteers that you mentioned, I would mention what's called the political entrepreneurs, the ones that the politicians or the aspirants to power who take advantage of the situation for their own political agenda. Those are called political entrepreneurs. Those are the ones that really fuel the fire, fuel the grievances. And those are the ones that tell people what suits their own agendas. So for example, there is a crucial question that I would like every Somali to ask himself or herself. And that question is just imagine, and it's just not imagination. It's not only a figment of imagination, but it is real. Two families that are neighbors. And those two families, they share everything and assume they are very poor, as was the case and is still the case with regards to the vast majority of the Somali population. They are very poor. Neither of them is better than the other, and they are neighbors, and they both have children, and they are both trying to make ends meet. And so when at the beginning of the civil strife, what happens is that suppose they are from, like in the Somali state case, for example, because the divisions are, they are different. They are not always tribal. For example, in Lebanon, it's religious. In some other countries, it could be class. In our case, it was tribal and, clans based. It was clan based. So assume again that those two neighboring families were from different clans, and assume one was from the general clan of those that have power, and the other one is from the other clans that feel politically marginalized. And so what happens? What happens is that the political entrepreneurs exploit that situation. They tell the family that they want support from. Things are happening to them because of the other clan. So what happened is that the two families all of a sudden, and I don't want to go into the details, but I think we can understand the rest of my argument. These two families that were probably even intermarried. One could be it could be that they were not just neighbors, but there was also intermarriage, connecting them. All of a sudden, they will be enemies, and they have become enemies. They became enemies in Somalia, and it's possible both families lose children, and they have lost children. Many such families, such neighboring families, lost family members because of the civil war. They took up arms against one another. Why? I think that's the most crucial question that every Somali needs to ask himself or herself. If we truly understand, think of and understand, what is it, or rather what was it that made those two families take up arms against one another, we will understand a lot about the Somali situation, how the civil war evolved. And so that is the role of the political entrepreneurs. The war profiteers, and also the profiteers, those that profit from statelessness, they come afterwards. When war breaks, there is a lot of, there is the political economy of war. So some see opportunities and they take advantage of those opportunities. It could be directly related to war, like trading in weapons and supplying this or that group, or it could be related in other things that people need and they are not directly related to the war, but they get the advantage because there is an opportunity here because there is no state. And so those are, whether we call them profiteers of war or profiteers, those that profit from statelessness, all of a sudden they find a lot of opportunity there and they accumulate a lot of wealth. So they have an inherent advantage in continuing the state, either the state of war or the state of statelessness. And they have an inherent advantage, even if there is a semblance of a state, they have an inherent advantage in keeping the state weak.
Could you eloquently describe one of the stages in the protracted history of conflicts from where it starts to where it's going and where it currently is? Somalia, however, seems to be stuck at the stage you just described. What do you think is fueling that collective unawareness of how the two families that you just described are stuck in what seems to be a continuation of the conflict. How long is it going to take? Who should contribute it in waking up the society in terms of where we are stuck at? Because it seems like we're taking 2 political steps forward, but 3 back in any given time of the past 30 years in the country's history. This is slumber. How could we wake the nation up?
You see, what makes the Somali situation even more challenging than others is the Somali culture that's based on the clan. That's an area that's in by itself, in and of itself, is really very big, very deep, and needs to be understood and not just superficially addressed and treated. The clan mentality, there is something called, there was a gentleman by the name, I'm kind of forgetting his name, but he lived in the 19th century. He was from Britain, and I think his name was Maine, or Maines was the last name. And he was specialized in the history of laws, legal history. And he divided societies into 2. He said some societies are societies of contract, and other societies are societies are societies that are built on the dignity of the family. The name of the family is more important than the contract, than what's good for the whole society. And by family here, I mean clan. Mm-hmm. So there are 2 different societies. So one society values what they see as the name of their clan. The other society values the laws and the constitution and the contract that the society as a whole has. I will just give you an example. A lot of times when you are talking to Somalis and they are talking about their grievances, for example, they are the grievances of their clan, and they are talking about a particular period. For example, they will say, in those years in the past, we didn't have any ambassadors, we didn't have any ministers, or we had only 2 ambassadors and the other clan had 10. You will rarely hear people complaining about not having enough schools in their villages, enough hospitals in their towns or in their regions, or enough roads, enough infrastructure. What's important to them even now, you will hear that, for example, when a new government comes into being and a prime minister is selected and the prime minister comes up with a government, with a cabinet, you'll hear a clan saying, it means, oh, we are not going to take this portfolio or this position. First of all, who says it's for the clan? It is not for the clan. We're building, the prime minister is building a cabinet for the whole country. And so you will hear, they will be up in arms if the portfolio of that particular position that their clansman was given is not something that they see as dignified, okay? They will say, no, we cannot take that. So you will never see them complaining a lot and clamoring for a hospital in their village, for a school in their village, for a road in their village. Those are a lot less important than the name, something that gains or wins the clan a name. So that kind of society is called society of status. So two different societies, society of contract and society of status. So that makes the Somali situation even more challenging, because we think of the poor family, okay, for example, let us stick to those two neighbors that were from two different clans that took up arms against one another. It's still what they think matters to them. Okay, when you look at their sentiments and how they feel, is the status of their clan. It doesn't matter, you know, what the clan brings them. So a culture that's built on that kind of mentality, the status of my clan, I think it would have been even better if the clan were to think about schools, hospitals, roads, and all of that. I mean, that could have been, we could understand that, but it's all about status. So that makes it more difficult. And that is exactly what makes it easier for the political entrepreneur and the profiteers of war and those that exploit statelessness or weak state, the weak state, okay, the feeble state, the failed state for their own economic ends and for their own wealth accumulation. That's exactly what they exploit, because to them, so nowadays, for example, you cannot criticize if you see someone who has become extremely wealthy because of his statelessness. Okay, if you talk about that, you will see, you may lose your life, as a matter of fact. And the one that kills you is probably one that gains nothing from any of from that wealth that has been accumulated to the person that he considers a cousin. It's just because they are from the same clan, and he's coming to the defense of his clansmen. So it's really becoming extremely challenging. Now, the other part of your question was, and I think I took a little longer to answer that question, is how can we tackle that? How can we counteract that? How can we counter it? Well, everything goes back to education and enlightenment. And here I'm not just talking about long-term education like schooling. Of course, that's always an answer. That always has to be there. But I mean political enlightenment. We really, you know, so who leads societies to change? It's usually the intellectuals. The intellectuals, they are not necessarily the public intellectuals that talk about politics and social science and all of that. It could be also the engineers, the doctors. It is that entire class of people that know what's happening and understand it very well. They are the ones that advance society and spearhead change. So people have to be enlightened. We have to tell people exactly what's going on. A lot of people kind of have a vague understanding that they're being exploited. They're being taken advantage of, but they don't know exactly how. And all these little things are not being tied together. So we need the system that exists now to be exposed to the public, exposed by, not by Somali returnees that come back from foreign countries and create what they call think tanks and become part of the system. Those people become part of the system. They cannot change anything. But I'm talking about people fearless. Pardon me? They make it worse. Yeah. Yes, actually, they make it worse because they further facilitate that system that exists now, the rotten system that exists. So what we need is people that really get together, work together to expose what's going on, to expose the rotten system, to expose the political economy that exists, that's unfair to the little guys, that's unfair to the vast majority of the population, and that is really inherently against the return of the Somali state or Somali statehood.
Right, which leads me, you know, to the question that perhaps by exposing that system and that corrupt system, and instead of perpetrating, instead of propping it up, with intellectual dishonesty, perhaps the best way to wake the society up, if you will, would be to explain and perhaps take this opportunity to explain as to where or, you know, do civil conflicts and civil wars lead societies to. I think if that is projected and that's shown in throughout history, it's not about where we are today only and being stuck in where we are today, but to let people know what the future holds if we stay on course.
You know, one of the tragic things in this, with us in the Somali situation is that people, you know, once in a while, the true self of the Somali comes through. For example, just a few days ago, there was this ruling by the ICJ,
Right.
International Court of Justice. And you remember the suspense,
Galvanized.
you know, when we and it galvanized the nation. And people are still extremely angry about the little bit that was given to Kenya. I'm happy with it, by the way. I'm happy with the overall situation because it could have been a lot worse. I'm okay with it. But they don't, and this is a moment, this is a chance, an opportunity for us to think what is statelessness could cause us. You can lose your land. You can lose your sea. We are already losing a lot of our natural wealth. You see, I tell Somalis, we have to think of how, I have this Somali expression, Somali catchword. Sidee u kala badbaadnaa, adduunkana ugu badbaadnaa. Okay?
Beautiful.
How can we be safe from one another and safe in the world? So it's not just from, it's not just how we can be safe from one another. It's not just internal. It's how we can survive in the world with our country intact, with our wealth intact for the future generations, not just for us, because this is not just for us. It's for the Somali future generations, decades from now, hundreds of years from now, inshallah, thousands of years from now. Somalia is for all those generations, not just for us. And how can we survive in that situation? Your clan cannot safeguard that, cannot protect the nation. Your clan cannot protect the nation. Your clan cannot protect its own territory, its own coast, its own resources. Right now, there are like the region I come from, for example, Senag, there are the mountains of Almado. People found out there is gold in there. That gold, there is a lot of illegal mining right now going on. The Somalis that are involved are getting very little of the profit. Most of the profit is going up. If any, they're getting very little. And they're doing it in a way that destroys the environment. And who is protecting all of that? The clan. Clans are doing that, okay? So system built on the clans can neither benefit the clan, can benefit neither the clan nor the nation. We can lose. The nation, and then if the nation loses, the clan loses, and everybody loses. So we have to have, our minds should be able to accommodate, okay? To take everything in, both the internal dangers and the dangers that are coming from outside, because they are real, okay? We have to have a solution for both. Right. You cannot say, I'm going to solve just this one thing, because that solution may create problems elsewhere. You have to take everything into account, and you have to save the nation. If you save the nation, save the country, you save everything, basically.
Right. And lastly, as we all know, Somali conflict has been going on as long as there has been Somalis on earth and in that part of the world. But what is possibly making things worse right now is the injection and the influence of outsiders, as you said. What role, or if I put it in another way, making the Somali conflict international, what effect does that have in bringing resolution to the existing conflict? As you know, but there's an extra table, there's an extra chair at the table right now when it comes to Somali reconciliation. What is called the international community or partners of Somalia are at the table, and they obviously are going to interject and propose things that they would like to see as a resolution. What that is perhaps not explained or analyzed enough. What can you tell us about that, and what role could it play in the conflict or finding a solution for the conflict, if not exacerbating?
You know, good question. You know, in this interview, we're barely touching, you know, the surface, scratching the surface of,
right.
of the problems, because they are really multifaceted and they are very deep, and they need to be addressed and really understood very, very well and explained to the Somali people. Somalia has become a project. Somebody has already said so. And Somalia wa mashru'. Somalia is really a project. Okay, the international community, you see, the international community, I'm not going to blame governments, but I'm going to blame the
individuals,
people that they send, the people that are on the ground. Okay, we're getting, supposedly, we're getting more aid than we received, probably if you put the entire time we were a government, from 1960 to early 91. I don't have the figures, but I wouldn't be surprised if the yearly amount we got from, in the form of aid, the amount we got in the form of aid is really minuscule compared to what we are now supposedly getting. And yet, when was the last major road built in Somalia? When was the last major airport built? When was the last major bridge built? How about hospitals? How about free education? How about free healthcare? How about all of that? And we haven't even talked about the federal member states, the so-called federal member states. They cannot handle a bridge. If that bridge, if it's flooded, right, and it's swept away, all of a sudden, you know, the whole region is in a standstill. Okay, they can't do any of that. They can't defend the sea. They can't do any of that. So anyway, so we are supposedly getting a lot more aid than we ever got before. What's happening to it? And people are not getting free healthcare. We used to have free healthcare, for God's sake.
Free education.
Free healthcare, free education. Right now, we are getting those of us that are in foreign countries, we're all the time getting, you know, people are we're getting phone calls from the country. People that have God knows how many children, and they want to send their children to school, but they can't pay the school fees. We didn't have those problems before. And we are not even talking about quality.
Or
we're
other
talking
services.
about free education, where we are not even discussing the quality of the supposed education and supposed healthcare that's now available. Okay, people, every now and then we see videos or we see photos of towns, of buildings, of lights, you know, and people will say, look at the horumarka la gaari. Look at the level of development, okay? But the roads are broken, okay? It rains and you will see all that flooding, okay? No sewage system, okay? No hospitals, no schools, okay? A lot of squatters, a lot of people that are internally displaced everywhere in the country, right? A lot of billions of poor people, okay? We're talking about development. What development? What is the single infrastructure that we can say that it has been built after, as far as I know, you see, I left the country in 1978. And after that, I have gone back, but rarely stayed for any appreciable period of time. Okay. I think after I left, when I left, it was after the war, the 1977-78 war. As far as I know, the two major projects, by then, whatever use or utility the military government had, by then it was exhausted. Okay, oh, the negatives were, we were getting into the realm of negatives. After the war, there wasn't much that regime can be proud of. But I think in the 80s, there was the road from Galkayo to Bosaso. And there was also the Bosaso harbor. And I believe there was also the road from Bur'o to Berbera. Okay. That is after I left the country. I don't know about other projects. There could have been other projects. But what other project? Okay. What other project can we boast of since 91, since the transitional government? I mean, what is there that we can boast of? Yet, they are telling us so many billions of dollars are being spent on Somalia. What for? Al-Shabaab are still there. Okay, what's going on? When did AMISOM come in? How much money do they get? What are they doing? Al-Shabaab is still there. Every once in a while, we hear that there were some skirmishes, okay? Al-Shabaab were pushed out, and then a few days later, sometimes they come back, and that's it. They are still there. So what's going on? What is changing? What is the international community doing? Halana is basically a colony, okay? All that money that's being spent in the name of the poor Somali masses, how is it benefiting the Somali masses? Okay, we know there is a group, there is a class that, if I might use the word class here, that's for whom that's okay. Okay, it's a group composed of those that benefit economically. It's a group it's an alliance. This class is an alliance. The ones that benefit economically, the ones that benefit politically, the rent-seeking intellectuals that come from foreign countries and go back to the country and benefit from that system. It's the NGOs, especially the bigger ones, and it's the supposed international community. Okay, that's in Somalia. All of that, so it includes both foreigners and Somalis, they benefit from the situation. They benefit from the continuation of the situation as it is. Yeah. That's the situation we are in.
And that's perhaps...
And the way to counteract that, the way to face that, the way to really fight that, it starts with enlightenment. Everything, every good thing that had, every political change, every big change that happened in societies, took place in society, if you look at history, it was preceded by a period of enlightenment. And here I'm not talking about decades, but we really have to tell the truth. It is the truth that will ultimately free the Somali people.
That's perhaps the best, spot to stop this and perhaps pick it up on another time and have a different perspective and push that forward. But I can't thank you enough for joining us and explaining to this very emotional situation that Somalis and time that Somalis are going through. And hopefully the leaders of the country would hear this and ask themselves these questions and perhaps have the leadership quality that could bring about the changes you spoke about. I really appreciate it, and I can't thank you enough for coming on and explaining what is seemingly a painful item to discuss. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me on this program.
Excellent.